The garden glowed with string lights, and the soft hum of a string quartet playing something gentle, something meant to feel timeless. White peonies spilled from every centerpiece. A pastel banner arched over the dessert table reading, "Welcome, Baby Hollis." My daughter-in-law, Meredith, had spared no detail. The napkins were monogrammed. The macarons were hand-painted with tiny footprints. I sat at a small round table near the back of the patio, just beside a standing heater, with a folded program in my lap and a glass of sparkling water I hadn't touched. My name tag read Margaret, grandmother, paternal, in neat calligraphy. Not grandma, not mom, not Mimi, which was what I had always hoped the baby would call me one day, just paternal. Like a branch of a family tree drawn in pencil, ready to be erased. Across the lawn, my son Nathan stood with his hand resting on the small of Meredith's back. She was 7 months along, glowing in a blush-colored gown that skimmed her belly like a whisper. Her mother, Lorraine, stood beside her in ivory, already dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, even though nothing had happened yet. I watched Lorraine squeeze Meredith's hand. I watched Nathan kiss the top of Meredith's head. I watched the photographer crouch down and capture all three of them laughing at some private joke. No one waved me over. No one said, "Mom, come get in the picture." I had practiced for this. I had practiced for 38 years, smiling small, hands folded, spine straight. There is a particular kind of stillness a woman learns when she realizes she is not the center of anything anymore, and I had mastered it a long time ago. The clink of a spoon against crystal brought the garden to a hush. Meredith stepped up to the little microphone set near the dessert table, a hand cradling her belly. "Thank you all so much for coming," she began, her voice warm, practiced. "Nathan and I are so overwhelmed by the love in this garden today." There was a ripple of awes. She went on, thanking her bridesmaids, thanking the caterer, thanking Nathan for being the most supportive partner a woman could ask for. Then she paused. "But there's one person," she said, her voice catching just slightly, "who I want to especially thank today. Someone who held my hand through every single IVF appointment. Someone who drove me to the clinic at 5 in the morning when I was too nervous to drive myself. Someone who prayed over me during every transfer, who brought me soup when the hormones made me sick, who never once let me feel alone." My heart lifted. My hand, without my permission, rose slightly from the napkin in my lap. "My real mother," Meredith said. "Lorraine. Mom, you are the reason this baby exists. I love you so much." Applause erupted. Lorraine pressed both hands to her face, shaking her head as though she couldn't believe the honor, as though it had not all been rehearsed. Nathan walked over, wrapped an arm around his mother-in-law, and kissed her temple. The photographer rushed forward, catching the three of them in a portrait that would, I knew even then, end up framed on their mantel. I did not move. I kept my hand where it was, returning slowly to the napkin, as if nothing had happened. I kept my smile small. I looked at the candle on my table and watched the flame bend sideways from someone's breath, and I thought, very clearly, so this is what erasure feels like. It feels like sitting at your own funeral and hearing the wrong name in the eulogy. The woman at the table beside me leaned over and whispered, "Oh, how sweet." She didn't know. She didn't know that I had taken out a second mortgage on the house I'd lived in for 41 years to pay for my son's wife to conceive. She didn't know that the money Meredith was calling a miracle had a lien against it, recorded at the county clerk's office in my name. She didn't know. Nobody in that garden knew. And my son, who had signed the loan paperwork beside me at the kitchen table last spring, who had hugged me and said, "Mom, I'll never forget this." My son did not stand up and correct her. He just clapped along. I was 43 the year I married Nathan's father, Gregory, and Nathan was 11, a quiet boy with brown eyes that always looked a little too tired for his age. His mother had left when he was 4, not died, just left, the way some people leave a room, with her coat on one arm and her car keys already in her hand. Gregory had raised him alone for 7 years before I came into the picture. I was a bookkeeper at a small accounting firm in suburban Connecticut. I had never been married, never had children, had long assumed those doors had closed behind me. When Gregory asked me to marry him, he said, "Margaret, I need you to know if you marry me, you're marrying him too. He comes first. He has to. I said yes without hesitation. The first night Nathan slept under my roof, he stood at the edge of my bedroom doorway at 2 in the morning, holding a stuffed rabbit with one ear coming loose. He didn't say anything. I just pulled back the covers on Gregory's side. Gregory was on a work trip, and he climbed in and pressed his small back against my stomach, and I didn't sleep the whole night, because I was too afraid of moving wrong and breaking whatever fragile thing had just happened. He called me Margaret for the first 3 years. Then, one night at the dinner table, he asked if it was okay if he called me Mom. He was 14. He stared at his mashed potatoes the whole time he asked. I said yes, and I excused myself to the bathroom, and I cried so hard I had to splash cold water on my face twice before I could come back to the table. Gregory died when Nathan was 19. A heart attack in the driveway, shoveling snow on a Tuesday. I was the one who found him. Nathan was away at college on a scholarship I had quietly supplemented from my own savings, though he did not know that. I called him from the kitchen phone, my hand so steady it scared me. He drove home that night in a borrowed car through a blizzard, and when he walked through the door, he collapsed into my arms and sobbed like he was 4 again, and his mother had just left. For the next 3 years, it was just the 2 of us. I worked late shifts doing tax prep to keep the house. I paid off Gregory's medical bills in $36 increments. I never once told Nathan we were struggling. And every Christmas, I made sure there was something under the tree with his name on it, even if it was a sweater I'd knitted from clearance yarn. He graduated. He got a job at a marketing firm in Boston. He met Meredith Caldwell at a charity gala when he was 27. Meredith was the only child of Richard and Lorraine Caldwell, a New Canaan family with a sailboat and a last name that meant something at the country club. She had the kind of blonde hair that looked like it had been lit from within, and she smiled at me the first time she met me, in exactly the same way the receptionists at Gregory's old law firm used to smile at me, polite, professional, already looking past my shoulder for someone more important. I made pot roast the night they visited. She pushed it around her plate and asked for the Wi-Fi password twice. Lorraine took over wedding planning before anyone asked her to. The invitations had the Caldwell monogram engraved at the top. The rehearsal dinner was at the Caldwell home. I was seated at the far end of the table, beside Meredith's great aunt, who was hard of hearing and kept calling me Marjorie. At the wedding itself, Nathan was everywhere laughing, toasting, dancing. He hugged me once in the receiving line. Lorraine gave a speech so long the catering staff had to reheat the entrees. I was not asked to give one. I had not been asked to give one when Gregory and I got married either, so I suppose it wasn't new. But at least at my own wedding, Nathan, 11 years old, had stood up on his chair and said, "I'm glad my dad picked you." That had been my speech. I'd lived on it for decades. The IVF began 2 years into their marriage. Meredith had what the doctors called diminished ovarian reserve. 3 rounds, then 4, then 5. Each round cost more than the last. I found out they were struggling when Nathan came to my house one Saturday afternoon in March. He stood in my kitchen with his hands in his pockets and looked at the tiles on the floor instead of at me. "Mom," he said, "we're running out of options. Meredith's last round didn't take, and insurance won't cover another cycle, and we've already drained our savings, and—" He stopped. His voice caught. "And I don't know what to do. Her parents said they've helped enough." I waited. "I hate to ask you this," he said. "I hate it, but I don't have anyone else, and we need $18,000 for the next round. The clinic wants it up front." I looked at him. My son, 31 years old, still standing in my kitchen the way he'd stood in my bedroom doorway at 7 years old, holding an invisible rabbit with one ear coming loose. I said, "Let me think." He nodded. He was already halfway to the door. "Mom, I know it's a lot. If there's any way—" "Nathan." He stopped. I said, "Let me think." I didn't say no. He breathed out so hard his shoulders dropped an inch. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my checkbook and my ledger and the old leather portfolio my own mother had left me. I had about $4,000 in my savings account. My retirement had taken a hit in 2008, and had never really recovered. But the house Gregory's and mine was paid off. The house was worth something. The next morning, I called a loan officer and asked about a home equity line of credit. The week after that, I signed the papers. The week after that, I transferred $18,000 into Nathan's account. He came over with a bouquet of grocery store lilies and hugged me so hard it hurt my back. "Mom," he said, "I'll pay you back, every penny. I swear to God. And you're going to be the best grandmother. She's going to love you so much." I believed him. I believed every word. Meredith sent me a handwritten thank you card 3 weeks later. It was on ivory cardstock with her monogram embossed at the top. It said, "Dear Margaret, thank you for your generous contribution to our family's journey. We are so grateful. M and N." Your generous contribution. Like I dropped a 20 in a collection plate. I didn't mention it to Nathan. I didn't mention a lot of things to Nathan. The round worked. They called me on a Thursday evening in July to say Meredith was pregnant. I cried in the kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear. I told Nathan I loved him. I told Meredith I loved her. I meant it both times. The baby shower was planned for a Saturday in October. I was invited. My name was on the invitation, which Meredith had mailed to me along with everyone else's, with a little sticky note that said, "Hope you can make it," like I was a former coworker. He made it. And at that baby shower, in a garden lit with string lights and filled with peonies that I knew I had partially paid for, my daughter-in-law thanked her real mother for making her child possible. I drove home that night in silence. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't turn on the heater in the car, even though the October air had teeth. I just drove, both hands on the wheel, the way I'd driven home from the hospital the day Gregory died. When I got into my house, I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, still in my navy dress, still in the pearl earrings Nathan had given me for Mother's Day 4 years ago, back when he still called me on Mother's Day. I stared at the wall. I thought about the loan documents sitting in the fireproof box in my closet. I thought about the monthly payment of $312 that would come out of my checking account on the 15th of every month for the next 10 years. I thought about the baby growing inside Meredith, a baby I had quite literally borrowed against my home to create a baby whose existence had just been publicly attributed to another woman. I thought about 100 small moments. The Wi-Fi password she asked for twice, the calligraphy on my name tag, paternal. And then I thought about my mother, my own mother, Dorothea, who had died when I was 31, who had spent her whole life being quiet, being useful, being behind the scenes. On her deathbed, she had gripped my wrist and said, "Margaret, don't wait until you're dying to be seen." I had nodded at the time. I had not understood. I understood now. I got up. I went to the closet. I pulled out the leather portfolio my mother had left me, the one I hadn't opened in years. Inside were documents my mother had spent a lifetime quietly accumulating. A small inheritance from her own father, a railroad man, that she had never told anyone about, not even my father. She had put it into certificates of deposit and rolled them over for 40 years. There were municipal bonds. There was a 20-acre parcel of undeveloped land in the Berkshires that my grandfather had bought in 1951 for almost nothing, and that was now, according to a property assessment I had requested 5 years ago and filed away, worth close to $600,000. There was a brokerage account she had opened in 1974, invested in index funds, that she had left to me with a note that read, "For when you need it, not before." I had never touched any of it. I had lived on my bookkeeping salary and my modest retirement and Gregory's pension. I had paid off Nathan's college debt without telling him. I had taken out a home equity line of credit to fund his wife's IVF because I did not want to touch what my mother had left me, because it had felt like the last real thing of hers I had. I added it all up on a yellow legal pad at my kitchen table. My hand did not shake. I was not wealthy by New Canaan standards, but I was, by any honest standard, comfortable. Very comfortable. And the Caldwells did not know, and my son did not know, because no one had ever asked. Don't wait until you're dying to be seen. I made a list, not a list of revenge. I have never been a vengeful woman, a list of what I wanted my life to look like, starting Monday morning. I wanted to see the ocean. I had not seen the ocean in 11 years. I wanted to stop paying $312 a month for a child I would be called paternal to. I wanted to be somewhere a woman had once told my mother was the most beautiful place in the world. I wanted to stop disappearing. On Monday, I called Harold Weatherby. Harold had been my estate attorney for 20 years. He was the one who'd handled Gregory's will. He was also the one who'd sat with me the afternoon I'd signed the HELOC papers for Nathan and said, very gently, "Margaret, are you sure?" I'd said yes. He'd nodded and stamped the papers. Now I sat across from him in his office and said, "Harold, I need to make some changes." He folded his hands. "Tell me." I told him. I wanted the HELOC paid off in full, immediately, from the brokerage account. I wanted Nathan removed as the sole beneficiary of my will. I wanted the house put on the market. I wanted the bulk of my mother's estate, what was now effectively my estate, placed into a charitable trust for stepmothers, women like me, women who had raised other women's children and been called Margaret for 3 years before being called Mom. Women who paid for weddings and IVF cycles and college tuitions and were seated at the back table near the heater. Harold wrote it all down in his careful hand. "And your son?" he said, not looking up. "My son," I said, "will receive a letter from me. That will be his inheritance." Harold nodded. He did not try to talk me out of it. He never had in 20 years. That was one of the things I liked about Harold. 2 weeks later, the house was listed. 3 weeks later, it sold to a young couple expecting their first baby. They paid asking price. I packed my life into 41 boxes and a U-Haul. I bought a small cottage in Camden, Maine. Gray shingles, white trim, a view of the harbor from the kitchen window. It cost less than a third of what my Connecticut house had sold for, and I paid cash. The rest went into the trust. I did not tell Nathan. He found out 6 weeks later when he drove out to my house with a bassinet in the back of his car. A bassinet I later learned Lorraine had picked out and found a sold sign in the yard and a different woman answering the panned door. He called me that afternoon, 11 times. I let it ring. On the 12th call, I answered. "Mom, where are you? What's going on?" There are other people in your house. Did something happen? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Nathan." "Where are you?" "I moved." You moved?" "Mom, you didn't tell me you were moving. You didn't tell me you were selling the house. What? Why would you do that without telling me?" There was a long silence. I listened to him breathe. "You never asked," I said. Another silence. Longer this time. "That's not fair, Mom." "Isn't it?" He sputtered. He didn't know what to say. I had spent 44 years saying things I didn't want to say so that he would be comfortable. It was strange and a little dizzying to not do that anymore. "Nathan," I said, "I love you. I will always love you. But I am not going to spend the rest of my life paying for a grandchild I will be introduced to as paternal. I'm not going to keep disappearing so that Lorraine can take up the room I make." "Mom, the HELOC is paid off. You don't need to worry about that. I used some of your grandmother's money." "Grandma's what money?" I almost laughed. Almost. "You never asked," I said again. "Goodbye, Nathan. Take care of Meredith. Take care of the baby." I hung up. I turned off my phone. I sat on the porch of my cottage and watched a lobster boat chug out of the harbor, and I did not cry. The messages started coming the next day. Texts from Nathan, increasingly desperate. A voicemail from Meredith that started with Margaret. I feel like there's been a terrible misunderstanding and got progressively colder as it went on, ending with, "And frankly, we feel betrayed." Lorraine called too. Lorraine, who had never once called me in 4 years. Her voicemail was a masterpiece of concern trolling. "Margaret, dear, we're all so worried." Nathan is beside himself. "This is such an emotional time for Meredith, and we just want to make sure you're okay. Perhaps you've been experiencing some confusion." I saved that one. I played it for Harold over the phone, and we both laughed for a long time. 3 weeks after I moved, Nathan showed up. He must have driven through the night. It was 6 a.m. when I opened the door to find him standing on my porch in a wrinkled coat, his hair flat on one side, his eyes red. He looked 31, and he looked 7, and he looked like his father on the driveway with the snow shovel, and my heart cracked straight down the middle like a piece of dropped porcelain. But I did not let it show on my face. "Come in," I said. "I'll make coffee." He came in. He sat at my small kitchen table and looked at my new dishes and my new curtains and my view of the harbor, and he looked like he was trying to solve an equation that had no solution. "Mom," he said finally, "I don't understand any of this." "I know," I said. "Why didn't you tell me about the money? The trust or whatever it was? Grandma's money? I didn't even know that existed." "I know you didn't." "So why?" "Because it was hers, Nathan." He flinched. I set a mug of coffee in front of him. I sat down across from him. "Nathan," I said, "do you remember what Meredith said at the baby shower?" He looked away. "Do you remember," I continued, "what she called Lorraine? Mom, she didn't mean—" "Don't. Please don't. Don't tell me what she didn't mean. She meant exactly what she said. And the reason I know she meant it is because you, my son, who I raised from the age of 11, who I sat with through every fever and every failed driving test and every heartbreak, you sat there and clapped." He put his face in his hands. "I paid for that baby, Nathan." His head jerked up. "What?" "The 18,000. I took it out against the house. I had a HELOC for 7 months. $312 a month, coming out of my checking account. I never told you because I didn't want you to feel bad. I wanted you to enjoy the pregnancy. I wanted you to be happy." His mouth was open. No sound came out. "And then I sat at that baby shower," I said, "and I listened to your wife thank her real mother for making that baby possible. And I watched you clap." "Mom, I didn't know. I didn't." "That's the problem," I said gently. "You didn't know. Because you never asked." And I kept thinking, if I just gave a little more, you'd see me. If I just held on a little longer, you'd turn around. I reached across the table and put my hand over his. "I'm not angry, Nathan. I really am not. I am tired. I am so tired. And I am 63 years old, and my own mother told me once not to wait until I was dying to be seen. And I almost did. I almost waited." He was crying now. Big silent tears, the way he used to cry when he was a boy and trying not to. "I want to meet the baby," I said. "I want to be in his life. But I will not do it as a footnote, Nathan. I will not be paternal on a name card. I will not come to Easter and sit at the back table next to the heater. I will not write a check for a preschool I will never be mentioned as having paid for. If Meredith cannot acknowledge who I am, then I will love that baby from a distance and send him birthday cards, and when he is old enough to ask questions, he will find me. But I am done begging to exist." "She will," he said. "I'll talk to her." "Mom, I swear." "Nathan." He stopped. "I don't need her to. That is the thing I have been trying to tell you. I don't need her to. I would like her to, but I don't need it. I needed it for a long time, and I wore myself down to the bone needing it, and I am finished." I squeezed his hand. I let go. "Drink your coffee," I said. "There's a beautiful lighthouse about a mile from here. I thought we might walk to it before you drive home." We walked to the lighthouse. He held my hand part of the way he used to when he was small and crossing a parking lot. The Atlantic was gray and wide, and it smelled like salt and something older than both of us. He told me about the baby's heartbeat at the last sonogram. He told me Meredith had not been sleeping. He told me Lorraine had bought the nursery furniture without consulting either of them and picked out a nautical theme Nathan hated. I listened. I did not offer to pay for different furniture. When he left that afternoon, he hugged me for a long time at the car, and he said, "Mom, I am so sorry." I said, "I know you are, and I forgive you, but I am not coming back." He nodded. He understood, I think, for the first time in a long time, that I meant what I said. The baby was born in December. A boy. They named him Henry Gregory. Gregory, for his grandfather. I cried when Nathan called to tell me the middle name. I flew down to meet him when he was 3 weeks old. I brought a hand-knit blanket the color of the Camden Harbor at dawn. Meredith answered the door, And she looked at me for a long moment before she stepped aside. Lorraine was on the couch, already holding the baby. "Hi, Margaret," Meredith said. Her voice was careful. "Thank you for coming." I stepped inside. I took off my coat. I walked over to the couch and looked at my grandson for the first time, and my whole chest filled with a warmth I had forgotten I was capable of. "Hello, Henry," I said. Lorraine started to hand him up to me. She hesitated. Meredith behind me said, "Mom, let Margaret hold him. He should meet his grandmother." It was not an apology. It was not a speech. It was 3 small words his grandmother spoken quietly in a living room on a Tuesday afternoon. But I took them, and I held them, and I held my grandson, and I thought, this is enough. For now. This is a beginning. I stayed for 2 hours. I drank tea. I let Henry wrap his tiny, impossible fingers around my thumb. I did not bring up the baby shower. I did not bring up the $18,000. I did not need to. At the door, Meredith touched my elbow. "Margaret," she said. Nathan told me. About the loan, about everything. I waited. "I'm sorry," she said, and I could see it cost her something to say it. Not everything, but something. I didn't know. I should have asked. I looked at her for a long time. "Yes," I said. "You should have. A lot of people should have." I put on my coat. I kissed the top of Henry's small warm head. "I'll see you in the spring," I said. "Come up to Maine. Bring him. The harbor is lovely in May." I drove back to the airport through the dusk, and I thought about my mother, and I thought about the lighthouse in Camden, and I thought about the trust that was right then, at that very moment, cutting its first check, $12,000, to a 47-year-old stepmother in Ohio who had raised 2 boys alone after their father walked out and who was, the application said, tired of being invisible. I smiled the whole flight home. Not a small smile, not a practiced one, a real one. The kind a woman smiles when she finally stops waiting to be seen and starts, at long and blessed last, seeing herself.